A year ago, I interviewed my neighbor, who I'll call George, to protect his identity. George had recently been diagnosed with early Alzheimer's disease. About a year before, George had retired, and while George was at work, working on his computer, he would leave to go to a meeting or to take a break, and when he came back to his computer, he couldn't remember what he had been working on. When George was in conversations with people, he would lose his train of thought. Now, that happens to most of us, but it happened to George frequently. George said, "I felt dumb, and I don't want to feel dumb anymore." George knew that I had been in language learning for years, and that language learning could help with memory. But unfortunately at that time, I didn't have anything that would be great to help George. However, I had been on a 30-year journey that got me to the situation with George and prepared me to create a solution for him and for others like him. I'd like to invite you to join me as I do a brief summary of my 30-year journey. In 1990, I served a mission for my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I spent 2 years in Peru and the Dominican Republic. During that time, I was among native speakers, and I grew to love the Spanish language. I also grew to love the people, and it was just this rich, amazing cultural experience. When I returned home, I went to visit my 87-year-old grandpa and my grandma. They were living at my aunt's house, and my grandpa was confined to a hospital bed. His body was very old and worn out with age, but his mind was sharp as a tack. My grandpa sat me down and he said, "David, I would like to learn Spanish, and I'd like you to help me. And here's what I'd like you to do. Record this, and I want you to read a verse in English, a verse of Spanish in the scriptures, and then I want you to describe, give some definitions of some of the words." So I said, okay, I'd be glad to do that. So I went home, I did that on a cassette tape, and I actually loved it. I loved what I was doing. It was just this amazing experience for me. That gave me the start in my language learning career, and I took it back to my grandpa, and he really liked it, and he wanted more. So it was a great experience for me. Then, not that long after, I got married at the ripe old age of 22, and we went to visit my wife's grandpa. He was also in his late 80s and also, interestingly, wanted to learn Spanish. But he wasn't like my other grandpa. He was an atheist, and so his strategy for learning a language was through Calvin and Hobbes. He wanted me to translate what Calvin would say to Hobbes and vice versa. Now, going back to my first grandpa, the grandpa that I talked about before, his wife, my grandma, never completed formal education. She never completed high school. A few years after I got back from my mission, she couldn't remember who I was. Now, as I analyzed these two situations and thought a lot about them, they were my two grandpas who were lifelong learners and wanted to, and still learning languages at their old age, in their late 80s. And then there was my grandma who couldn't remember who I was. So I thought, is this causation or correlation? Was their brain sharp because they kept learning, or was it just genetics? These are questions that I spent many years along my journey thinking about and eventually researching. So the next point, back to the story, the next point in my journey is I got a degree in Spanish, and before I finished my degree, I taught first and second year Spanish at the university as an adjunct instructor. And the university wanted me to use a specific curriculum, a specific textbook. And that textbook was great at teaching students verb conjugation, grammar, and vocabulary. But after 2 years, my students couldn't just carry on a conversation with each other, much less a native speaker. And that was very frustrating for them, and it was also really frustrating for me. And I said, there has got to be a better way. So I spent the next few years developing a system of learning languages. And it made learning sentences, to speak in sentences, very quickly possible. And I helped, and the system also helped with conversation and helped to understand native speakers. That gradually grew into a thriving business, and in a period of 9 years, we sold over $10 million worth of product. We sold it to over 130 different countries, to academic institutions of all levels. Now, unfortunately, all of that $10 million didn't come to me. I had many employees, I had product cost, I had a lot of rent and so forth. Now, as I was working in that business, and this was 16 years after my experience with my grandpa, I had a 93-year-old man named Fritz call me at work. And Fritz had bought our Spanish course, and he was so excited and just so interested in it, and it was fun to hear Fritz. And then 2 weeks later, Fritz called again, and then a month later he called again, and Fritz kept calling. Eventually I would hide from Fritz, but somehow he always found me. Eventually over time I grew to like our conversations again, but it reminded me of that, my question of the elderly and learning Spanish and keeping your brain sharp. And it made me really think. Now back to the business. So the business went really well. I built my dream house with my wife. We paid it off. We felt like we were on top of the world. We felt like we could retire in 3 to 5 years. And then business tragedy struck. I missed a key technology. I didn't convert my course to mobile. Now, it didn't help also that that time was the Great Recession. So 2 things were against me, and needless to say, the sales started to drop. From 2009 to 2013, it dropped, and it kept dropping. Eventually, in 2013, I had to sell my business for a fraction of what it had been worth. This was a challenging thing for me, a challenging time. But then after that, I did the most logical thing. I invested most of the money into a new business that I founded, and it was a marketing business. About 3 or 4 months later, the marketing business flopped. Then, with the remaining money I had, I put it into a nonprofit that I had started years before, hoping that it would provide enough money to support my family. But after 6 months, unfortunately, it didn't. Then my retirement went bankrupt. So then I did the second next best thing under the circumstances. I started a small marketing agency. For 5 years after that, we barely made under the poverty line. It was kind of a challenging time. And I began to think, maybe I wasn't meant to do marketing as a career. During that time, we got calls from the school district offering government assistance to pay for school lunch for our kids for free. That was pretty humbling also. A few years into that marketing agency, I remembered my passion for language learning. In 2016, I started a master's degree in language pedagogy. That's teaching. And I took classes on learning how to teach languages, curriculum development and design. I took a course in brain science and language. And that's a picture of me with a real life brain. And then after years of looking for a job, I applied for 72 jobs in my last count, and I finally got a job in, you guessed it, marketing. So I worked my way up at the company. I became the marketing director, and now I'm the chief product officer at an education company called Reading Horizons that provides curriculum for children to learn how to read. Now is when the story comes full circle. A year ago, I interviewed George, but I decided to do something about it. I wanted to help him. I wanted to help people like him. I wanted to help my parents, my aunts, and my uncle. And I wanted to ensure that I could keep my brain sharp in retirement also, which is in about 15 years. So I started to dig in. I did more research. I did more some post-master's studies, reading on memory in the elderly, on learning science, and here's what I discovered. And I hope it can help you or the seniors in your life. There are reasons that your memory slips when you get older. And there are also things you can do about it. So let's take a look and see how it works. Our brains have 86 billion neurons, and this right here is a neuron. Now, this right here is a synapse, and a synapse is where neurons connect with each other. Now, with the neurons, there is a chemical that's released from one neuron to the other, and this chemical is called neurotransmitter. It's a neurotransmitter. And neurotransmitter, I like to think of neurotransmitters as a fertilizer. So just like fertilizer can keep your lawn green, it can also help your brain. But if you have a lack of neurotransmitter, then your lawn becomes unhealthy, just like in this picture. Now, there are different types of neurotransmitters. Some of them control sleep, some control mood, concentration, and so forth. Now, my favorite neurotransmitter is called acetylcholine. Some people call it acetylcholine, but I prefer acetylcholine. This is key for the memory, especially when you're older. Acetylcholine is especially important for the elderly who have trouble remembering. They've tested elderly with memory challenges, and they've tested their brains, and the acetylcholine in their brains is so low, it's not even measurable. So just like with no fertilizer, the brain your grass will become yellow, and that's also what can happen to your memory. So what is the solution? We need more acetylcholine in the brains of the elderly. Now, there are drugs that come out that help with acetylcholine, but some scientists believe that this only helps for 4 to 6 months. There's also a natural way to gain more acetylcholine neurotransmitter in your brain. If you gain more, that can be like the fertilizer that helps your memory be nice and healthy, like the green grass. So, what is the solution? How do you gain more acetylcholine? Here's the key. It's by learning a new skill or ability. That helps the acetylcholine return. Now, the following things don't help. Reading doesn't count. Working at your job of 20 years doesn't count. Speaking your own language doesn't count, because they use skills that you've already mastered. So the ideal thing, or the ideal new skill that neuroscientists have mentioned, is learning a new language. Learning a new language turns on brain systems that keep your brain in shape for creating memories of all kinds. It provides more acetylcholine, like the fertilizer, that keeps your memory nice and healthy and green like the grass. So how much can your memory be improved? Research indicates that the right brain exercises can improve your memory by 20 to 30 years. So for example, if you're 80 years old, your memory could end up being like that of a 50 to 60-year-old. So remember, learning a new skill or ability helps the acetylcholine to return in your brain, which also helps your memory to improve. Now let's talk about learning science. There are 4 strategies that can help anyone improve in their learning between 17 to 74%. They can help individuals in schools, business, and it's especially helpful for the elderly. And would you like to know what these 4 key strategies are? I wish I would have had these key strategies when I was in school. I wish I would have known about them. They are, number 1 is retrieval practice, number 2 is spaced repetition, number 3 is combining, and number 4 is awareness. Now, if you're organized, you could take a language course and you could do this all yourself. But that could take a while and be very challenging. So I've taken all of these strategies, all these steps, and put them together into language learning. And I've built SpanishForSeniors.com, where I've combined these strategies and made them available to seniors for free. Now, here's a disclaimer. If you're not a senior, you can still use SpanishForSeniors.com. Just don't tell anyone. Now, there are let's talk about the first key to learning. So that's retrieval practice. Retrieval practice, it can come at the middle or the end of learning, and you try to retrieve or recall the information you've learned. Now, if you can't remember it all, it's okay. Struggling to remember actually helps learning. It's scientifically proven. Now, when you're learning a foreign language, it's important to learn each word or phrase or go over it in a meaningful way 16 times so it sticks to your brain. This can be done through retrieval practice with flashcards or an online quiz. Now, remember, retrieval practice can help learning improve from 13 to 18%. The second key to learning is spaced repetition. This can help learning by up to 17%. Here's how spaced repetition works. So let's say in week 1, you have 4 learning sessions. You do one on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. These could be around 30 minutes. Week 2, you also have 4 additional learning sessions. And now, your first session, you did greetings. Now, what you do for spaced repetition is your next session, session 2, you also review greetings using retrieval practice. Now, again, spaced repetition, you review it again in session 4, then you review it in session 8. After session 8, you continue session 16, and with another review, session 32, and session 64. So that is spaced repetition. With spaced repetition, your learning can improve up to 17%. The third key is combining. Combining can help you improve your learning from 16 to 32%. Here's how combining works. Okay, let's say your first session, you learn about greetings. In your second session, you learn about survival phrases. And then again, here's the spaced repetition, right, of the greetings. Now, with combining, you actually you combine survival, the vocabulary for survival, and with greetings, you put them together in a random quiz of both. This combining helps learning from 16 to 32%. So the fourth key is awareness. With awareness, you can improve your learning by up to 7%. For awareness, as you're learning, you stop and you analyze your progress and you ask, how am I doing? What can I improve? And you make a plan. So awareness would happen here, for example, after 3 sessions, you would do an awareness session where you ask, how am I doing? And you make a plan for improvement. So remember, with awareness, you can improve your learning by up to 7%. Now, using all of those techniques will help you learn more, will help a foreign language stick longer, and can help your memory improve by anywhere from 20 to 30 years. Now, I've just gone through my 30-year journey that prepared me to create a solution for those struggling with memory issues. Imagine a world where people can keep their brain sharp through the end of their life. I built SpanishForSeniors.com to help create this type of world. I made it free, and now I share it with you and your loved ones to help improve their quality of life. Thank you.